At 59 years old, Cris Carter finally speaks with a clarity that only time and scars can shape. The voice that once carved its name into NFL history now carries a weight that does not come from touchdowns or accolades. It comes from truth, hidden truth. Truth he avoided for decades because it cut deeper than any hit he ever took across the middle. For years, fans believed they knew why Carter became one of the most disciplined and relentless receivers the league had ever seen. They praised his hands, his footwork, his drive. Yet behind the highlight reels lived a man shaped by betrayal, resentment, and a series of dark turning points that almost erased him before he became a star. The quiet feuds, the moments that hardened him, the decisions that saved him and destroyed parts of him at the same time. Today, he finally reveals the 6 hidden truths that defined his life. Truths that the NFL never wanted elevated. Truths that explain why a man with Hall of Fame numbers still carries the look of someone who survived something larger than football. Why did a receiver so gifted spend years fighting his own shadow? Why did he never forgive certain people who crossed his path? And why does he say that his greatest victories came from the darkest chapters of his life? This is the untold story that shaped Cris Carter. The rise, the fall, the redemption, and the truths he can no longer keep to himself. Cris Carter entered the NFL with a mix of elegance and edge that few receivers of his generation possessed. Born in Dayton, Ohio, he grew up in a world that demanded toughness long before football did. By the time he arrived at Ohio State, he was already marked as a prodigy. Smooth roots, Velcro hands, an instinct for separating from defenders that felt more like choreography than athleticism. Scouts said he was destined for greatness. Coaches said he was born for the spotlight. Yet beneath the surface lived a young man, fighting impulses he could not always control. Temptations, pressure, a desire for validation that sometimes outweighed discipline. These forces would soon collide in ways that nearly derailed everything. When the Philadelphia Eagles brought him into the league, they believed they were getting a future franchise cornerstone. For a brief moment, it looked that way. Carter flashed brilliance every time he touched the field. His confidence soared. His skill set was unmistakable. But success amplified everything else inside him. The habits he thought he could manage began to spread into every corner of his life. Quietly at first, then loudly. Before long, the Eagles faced a decision that would shock the football world. They cut him. Not because of talent, because of the chaos behind the scenes. It was a move that could have ended his story right there. Instead, it became the fracture that reshaped him. Minnesota offered him a second life. A chance without guarantees. A chance without promises. A chance he knew he could not waste. The Vikings did not just rebuild his career. They rebuilt his identity. He learned to channel his hunger into discipline. He turned his weaknesses into rituals of control. Film, footwork, precision. The man who once played emotionally now played with surgical calculation. Every route mattered, every rep mattered, every mistake haunted him until he corrected it. In Minnesota, Cris Carter did more than resurrect his career. He forged the version of himself the league now reveres. By the time he retired, he had become a symbol of reinvention, a Hall of Fame receiver, a mentor, a survivor of battles most fans never knew he fought. But behind that polished legacy lie the hidden truths that shaped his relentless pursuit of perfection. The rivalries that altered him, the betrayals that hardened him, the moments of collapse that forced him to admit the price of greatness. Hidden truth. Number 5 begins with a name that once stood where Cris Carter wished to be, a figure who symbolized everything he believed he deserved early in his career, yet could not reach because of the chaos consuming his life at the time. That name is Buddy Ryan, the head coach who cut him from the Philadelphia Eagles. To fans, it was a routine roster move. To Carter, it became a wound that stayed open for many years. Buddy Ryan was respected, feared, and unapologetically committed to fielding players he believed he could trust. Carter wanted to be one of those players. Instead, he became the example of what Ryan believed had gone wrong inside the locker room. The conflict began long before the public ever sensed it. Carter's explosive talent kept him on the field, but his private behavior kept him on the edge of collapse. Missed meetings, inconsistent focus, and an addiction he believed he could hide. Ryan saw through it. At first, he pushed Carter with harsh coaching and blunt conversations. Then patience ran out. The Eagles cut him shortly before the 1989 season. The headline reduced his release to a tactical decision. Ryan later said that all Carter did was catch touchdowns. The statement followed Carter for decades. To him, it was not just criticism. It felt like a dismissal of his entire identity. The defining moment of this hidden truth arrived not on a field, but in Carter's memory every time he looked back at his career. Being cut by Ryan forced him into a confrontation with himself. It was the hit he never saw coming. A hit that did not bruise his body but shattered his illusions. Many athletes crash after such an event. Carter rebuilt. The Vikings gave him a lifeline, and he took it with both hands. Every disciplined rep, every precise route, every quiet night when he chose structure over impulse. All of it connected back to the humiliation he felt when Buddy Ryan told him he was no longer part of the Eagles. Years later, when Carter entered the Hall of Fame, he thanked many people who shaped his journey, but he never forgot the blunt force of Ryan's decision. He carried that memory like a scar that kept his ego grounded. Some say Ryan saved his life by forcing him to confront addiction. Others say Ryan simply gave up on a troubled young player. Carter's truth lies somewhere between these views. He admitted that the moment still burns, not out of hatred, but out of acknowledgement that his career was rebuilt on the rubble of that rejection. The cold truth is that Cris Carter never fully forgave Buddy Ryan. The decision that nearly ended him also created the hunger that defined him. That contradiction lived inside him for decades. He knows it shaped his greatness. He also knows it came with a price he never forgot. Hidden truth. Number 4 centers on a rivalry that sharpened Cris Carter's edge and constantly reminded him that greatness in the NFL is never handed to anyone. This truth belongs to Michael Irvin, the emotional engine of the Dallas Cowboys dynasty. Their connection was complicated. They were friends. They were competitors. They were mirrors of each other's past mistakes and future ambitions. Yet beneath the public respect lived a tension that burned hotter than fans ever understood. Carter did not just want to outperform Irvin. He wanted to surpass the aura that Irvin carried. He wanted a legacy that people would not overlook when discussing the greatest receivers of his era. The conflict between them began with style and personality. Irvin thrived on swagger and emotional fire. He carried himself with the confidence of a king who ruled the NFC in the early 1990s. Carter, on the other hand, played with precision control and an almost surgical focus on technique. The contrast created a natural rivalry, but the real fracture came when their careers intersected with their personal histories. Both men overcame off-field struggles. Both fought demons that threatened to destroy them. Yet Irvin triumphed on the biggest stage while Carter watched from afar. Super Bowls define legacies. Carter's resume lacked that crowning jewel. It became an unspoken weight between them. The iconic moment that shaped their rivalry came during one of the fiercest eras of NFC battles. The Vikings and Cowboys met in games that carried the intensity of playoff wars. Carter delivered elite performances. Irvin responded with dominance of his own. Every catch felt like a message. Every celebration carried an edge. The cameras captured smiles, but beneath those smiles lived a competition that pushed both players to their limits. Fans celebrated the spectacle. Carter felt the pressure of comparison. Irvin had rings. He had the national spotlight. He had the narrative. Carter had to fight for respect every single week. There was one moment that Carter often remembered when speaking about Irvin. During a heated game, both men exchanged words that cut deeper than the trash talk usually heard on the field. It was not about routes or coverage. It was about legacy. Irvin reminded Carter of what he lacked. Carter responded with a fire that came from years of fighting for redemption. The cameras never caught it. The microphones never heard it. But Carter carried that moment with him for decades. It became a fuel source he returned to whenever doubt crept in. Despite the tension, Carter and Irvin eventually grew to admire each other's resilience. They understood the battles the other had fought. They understood the weight of personal demons. They understood what it meant to rebuild from the inside out. But admiration does not erase rivalry, especially a rivalry built on comparisons that Carter never enjoyed hearing. The cold truth is that Cris Carter respected Michael Irvin deeply, but he never escaped the shadow of their rivalry. It pushed him. It haunted him. It shaped the disciplined machine he became. And although he does not say it openly, the truth remains. He never forgot the moments when Irvin stood where he wished to stand. Hidden truth number 3 is tied to a figure who never lined up across from Cris Carter on Sundays, yet changed the course of his life more than any defender he ever faced. This truth belongs to himself in the years before Minnesota, the version of Cris Carter that almost destroyed everything. Many legends speak about rivals coaches or critics who pushed them. But for Carter, the darkest conflict came from the man he was becoming during his early NFL years. He carried pain he refused to address. He carried habits he believed he could control. He carried denial that grew heavier with every season. Before he ever battled the league, he battled the reflection that stared back at him in private. The conflict began when Carter's talent outpaced his discipline. At Ohio State, he was celebrated, admired, and constantly elevated by the people around him. The NFL intensified that spotlight. The Eagles expected production. Fans expected highlights. Carter felt the pressure but believed he could navigate his growing addictions while maintaining performance. He told himself he was fine. He told himself he could manage it. He told himself the consequences would never catch up. That version of Cris Carter was confident, reckless, and dangerously certain that his gifts could cover his flaws. It was a mindset that nearly ended his career before it truly began. The moment that defined this truth was not a single event, but a collapse that unfolded behind closed doors. Missed film sessions, missed rest, missed accountability. He relied on instinct instead of preparation. He played with brilliance on Sunday and chaos on every other day of the week. The Eagles saw it. Teammates whispered about it. Coaches confronted him. But the internal battle continued. Then came the cut, the humiliation, the words from Buddy Ryan. The world thought it was a harsh football decision. Carter knew it was the collision between who he was and who he pretended to be. It was not the league rejecting him. It was his old self finally losing the war he had been avoiding. The turning point happened when he reached Minnesota with nothing guaranteed. He arrived with fear. Fear of failing again. Fear of wasting his talent. Fear of letting his family down. Fear of becoming a cautionary tale. For the first time, Carter faced the truth he had been running from. He admitted the addiction. He acknowledged the damage. He confronted the inner storm he once denied. The Vikings offered support structure and trust, but the battle was still internal. He rebuilt himself through discipline. He became obsessed with routine. He mastered his craft with meticulous care. Every improvement felt like a victory over the man he used to be. The cold truth is that Cris Carter's greatest rival was never a defensive back or a divisional foe. It was the version of himself that believed talent alone was enough. He never forgave that early version for almost ruining his life. And he never allowed that man to resurface again. The pristine footwork, the precision routes, the legendary hands. All of it was born from the ashes of the person he buried. Su that lan, lungla, Carter luon, no min jin suit, jan kmat, tat kavi, ban ta. Jo la muashithu sayu hat im lang hat va that hat. Hidden truth. Number 2 belongs to a figure who never raised his voice at Cris. Carter never clashed with him publicly and never intended to hurt him, yet left a mark that shaped the rest of Carter's career. That figure is Randall Cunningham, the electrifying quarterback who represented everything Carter wanted at the exact moment his life was falling apart in Philadelphia. Their connection was deeper than a QB-WR pairing. They were young stars rising together. They were supposed to define an era. But instead of reaching greatness side by side, their paths split in a way that left Carter with regret, envy, and a sense of loss he carried for decades. The conflict began when Carter's personal struggles disrupted the rhythm that should have existed between them. Cunningham played with a style that demanded trust. Improvised, explosive, unpredictable. He needed receivers who could adjust to broken plays and make magic in chaos. Carter had the talent for it, but not the stability. Missed meetings and inconsistent preparation slowly fractured the connection. Cunningham continued to ascend as a superstar while Carter spiraled. The feeling that haunted Carter for years was not resentment toward Cunningham's success, but the painful awareness that he should have been part of it. The moment that defined this hidden truth was not a spectacular play, but a silence that fell between them after Carter was released. Cunningham kept flourishing while Carter disappeared from the narrative. Watching his former teammate thrive without him became a reminder of what he had lost. The success of the Eagles' offense after he left was a wound he kept hidden. Every highlight featuring Cunningham scrambling and delivering impossible throws felt like an alternate reality where Carter might have been the one catching them. Instead, he watched from afar, rebuilding his life in Minnesota. In 1998, fate brought a strange twist. Cunningham and Carter crossed paths again in the most unexpected way. Cunningham joined the Vikings, and suddenly, the duo that fell apart in Philadelphia had a second chance to coexist. But this time, Carter was reborn. Disciplined, focused, determined. Cunningham was older, but his magic remained. The season they shared became one of the most electric offenses in league history. 25 touchdowns for Moss, 17 for Carter. Cunningham played like a revived legend, and Carter, now the mentor, steadied the offense with veteran mastery. Yet even in that triumphant season, Carter carried a truth he never voiced. He wondered what their careers could have become had he been ready in Philadelphia. Had he been the disciplined version of himself sooner? Had he not forced the team into a decision that separated them for nearly a decade? Their reunion was redemption. It was healing, but it was also a mirror reflecting who Carter used to be. That contrast lingered. The cold truth is that Cris Carter never fully forgave himself for missing the opportunity to grow alongside Randall Cunningham from the beginning. He admired Cunningham, he respected him, he learned from him. But the shadow of what could have been shaped Carter's hunger to never waste another moment again. Hidden truth. Number 1 belongs to a man who shaped Cris Carter's career more than any coach rival or teammate. A man whose decision support and relentless belief sculpted the disciplined machine Carter became. This truth belongs to Dennis Green, the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, the architect of Carter's resurrection, and the figure Carter revered yet feared to disappoint. Their relationship was built not on comfort, but on responsibility. Green did not just coach Carter. He rebuilt him, molded him, demanded the highest standard from him because he knew the consequences if Carter ever slipped again. The conflict between them came from a place of pressure, not hostility. Green gave Carter the second chance no one else was willing to risk. That opportunity came with expectations that sometimes felt heavier than the league itself. Green was direct. He was intense. He did not believe in excuses. Every mistake Carter made, Green turned into accountability. Every success Carter achieved, Green credited to discipline rather than talent. It was a philosophy Carter needed, but often struggled under. There were days when Carter felt suffocated by the weight of Green's trust. The fear of failing the man who saved him became a shadow he carried into every practice and every game. The defining moment of this truth arrived during the early 1990s, when the Vikings were still shaping their identity. Carter had become a reliable receiver, But Green wanted more. He pushed him toward precision that bordered on obsession. A wrong step in a route, a lazy release, a hesitation in traffic. Green corrected everything with a fierceness that startled younger players. Some thought he was too hard on Carter, but Carter understood why. Green saw what no one else saw. He saw a Hall of Fame career inside a man who once lost control of his life. Green refused to let that potential waste away. As the seasons passed, Carter's success grew. 1,000-yard seasons, record-setting catches, leadership in the locker room. Yet, with every accomplishment, Green raised the bar. Their relationship evolved into a partnership built on trust, mixed with unspoken tension. Carter thrived because Green refused to let him settle for anything less than excellence. When the Vikings drafted Randy Moss in 1998, Green challenged Carter to lead mentor and balance a generational talent who arrived with fire and unpredictability. Carter embraced the task because Green expected it. Their team became one of the most explosive offenses the league had ever witnessed. But behind the triumph was an emotional truth Carter rarely shared. He feared that without Green's guidance, he might relapse into the habits that once destroyed his career. That fear created dependence. That dependence created a silent pressure. Carter respected Green deeply, but the responsibility to uphold Green's faith sometimes felt like a burden he could not express. When Green passed away in 2016, Carter spoke with grief that revealed the depth of their bond. He thanked Green for saving his life, but buried inside those words was the truth that Carter had lived under standards shaped by both gratitude and fear. The cold truth is this: Cris Carter never stopped carrying the weight of Dennis Green's belief. It shaped him, it elevated him, it haunted him, it defined him more than any defender he ever faced. The bonus truth belongs to a figure fans rarely associate with conflict in Cris Carter's story, yet the emotional imprint he left on Carter was undeniable. This hidden influence came from Randy Moss, the generational talent who both elevated and unsettled Carter during their years together in Minnesota. Publicly, Carter embraced Moss as a younger brother. Privately, Moss forced Carter to confront insecurities he believed he had buried long ago. When Moss arrived in 1998, Carter was already the veteran leader, the mentor, the disciplined technician who had rebuilt his life. But Moss was different. Moss was raw brilliance, effortless speed, instinctive playmaking. He possessed the kind of natural talent Carter never allowed himself to rely on. Carter respected it. He admired it. Yet it stirred an uncomfortable truth. Moss represented everything Carter could have been in his youth if he had not lost precious years to addiction chaos and self-destruction. Moss became a reminder of the time Carter wasted. The defining moment of this bonus truth came early in their partnership. During film study, Green praised Moss for a play that Carter believed required more discipline. Moss responded with a confidence that bordered on defiance. Carter felt a flash of jealousy, not at Moss's talent, but at the freedom Moss had to be brilliant without the scars Carter carried. It was a moment of internal conflict that Carter kept quiet. Moss never meant harm. He simply played the game the way only he could. The cold truth is that Randy Moss pushed Cris Carter into a silent confrontation with his past. He loved Moss like family, but the presence of a prodigy forced him to accept the cost of his earlier mistakes. That truth followed him long after both men left the field. Cris Carter's legacy was not shaped by touchdowns alone. It was sculpted by fractures. It was carved from the weight of what he lost, what he recovered, and what he carried long after the stadium lights dimmed. To understand his place in football history, one must look beyond the statistics and highlight reels. His story lives in the tension between talent and turmoil, between redemption and regret, between the man he became and the man he feared becoming again. Every hidden truth he carried was a thread woven into a larger tapestry that defined not just his career, but the emotional spine of his life. The journey began with humiliation, a fall so public it became impossible to ignore. Being released by Philadelphia was more than a professional setback. It was a collision between reality and denial. Buddy Ryan's decision stripped Carter of the illusions he had relied on. It forced him to rebuild not only his career but his identity. That moment became the first catalyst of his transformation. Without that fall, the disciplined version of Cris Carter would never have emerged. His greatness required destruction before rebirth. His rivalry with Michael Irvin added another dimension to his evolution. Irvin's ring's swagger and national spotlight cast a shadow that Carter never fully escaped. Yet that shadow gave him purpose. It sharpened his commitment to precision. It fueled his obsession with control. It reminded him that legacy is not guaranteed, it is earned. In Irvin's reflection, Carter saw not an enemy, but a standard he refused to fall short of. The rivalry forged a resilience that statistics alone could never capture. The internal battle against his younger self might have been the fiercest struggle of all. No defender frightened him more than his past. No opponent remained closer than the mistakes he once made. Every disciplined habit he adopted in Minnesota was a rejection of the man he had been in Philadelphia. His legacy was built on this war within. Fans saw the polished product, the elegance of his roots, the reliability of his hands. They never saw the nights he chose sobriety over impulse, stability over chaos, structure over collapse. These victories were invisible, yet they shaped his entire existence. Randall Cunningham's path brought both pain and reconciliation. Carter spent years haunted by what might have been. The chemistry that could have blossomed in Philadelphia became a ghost he chased in silence. Their reunion in Minnesota healed some wounds but exposed others. Carter learned that destiny is not a straight line, and regret can be both a teacher and a burden. His legacy absorbed this truth. Growth often emerges from disappointment. Dennis Green's influence carried a weight unmatched by anyone else in his life. Green was not just a coach, he was the architect of Carter's rebirth. His expectations were both a blessing and a shadow. Every standard he set became a rung in the ladder. Carter climbed toward greatness. Every demand he made became a mirror, reflecting what Carter could become if he never slipped again. Their bond was layered complex, built on trust and pressure. When Carter speaks of Green, the gratitude is profound, but underneath it lies the emotional truth that his identity as a disciplined, controlled, precise professional was shaped by a man he never wanted to disappoint. Carter's story cannot be told without recognizing the weight of Green's belief. Randy Moss added the final layer to Carter's evolution. Moss represented pure talent, unburdened brilliance, a reminder of the years Carter lost to his own choices. Mentoring Moss became both healing and unsettling. Carter found pride in guiding him, yet Moss's effortless greatness forced Carter to confront a truth he rarely voiced. His career was both a triumph and a cautionary tale. He became great, but he might have been greater. Moss showed him what unbroken potential looked like. When these truths converge, they form the core of Cris Carter's legacy. He was not defined by perfection. He was defined by reconstruction. He was not a receiver who simply succeeded. He was a man who clawed his way back from the edge and remade himself piece by piece. His narrative belongs to the rare group of athletes who became legendary, not because their path was smooth, but because they survived the jagged places. The cold truth is this: Cris Carter's legacy lives in every player who fights private battles, every talent nearly lost to self-destruction, every athlete who rebuilds from the ashes. His story is proof that greatness is not the absence of failure, but the mastery of recovery. And long after he left the field, the echoes of his transformation continue to ripple through the league he once nearly lost. Cris Carter's story is not just the tale of a Hall of Fame receiver. It is a reminder that greatness is often built in the shadows, shaped by mistakes, redemptions, and the truths we carry long after the crowd stops cheering. His journey invites every fan, to look beyond the numbers and see the man who fought his way back from the brink, the man who rebuilt himself. Through discipline and resilience, the man who turned scars into milestones. The hidden truths he finally revealed show us a legacy forged through pressure, responsibility, and a refusal to surrender to the darkness that once consumed him. Now the question becomes yours. Which of these 6 hidden truths changed the way you see Cris Carter's career? Which rivalry or revelation struck you the hardest? Do you believe his greatest transformation came on the field or within himself? These stories live on because fans like you continue the conversation, adding new meaning to the legends we thought we already understood. If you found value in uncovering these truths and exploring the emotional layers behind football's most iconic figures, make sure you stay connected. Like the video to help it reach more fans who appreciate deep cinematic storytelling. Subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths for more untold stories from the golden age of football. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey into the past. The legends are waiting, and every story has a hidden side worth discovering.